Okay, today I want to take a look at the entry players in the NAL. We are going to look at the data from Stage 3, so we're only 2/3 of the way through the stage with 6 of the 9 playdays being played. And the reason I'm looking at this data instead of older data sets like Stage 1, Stage 2 is because that's just not up to date anymore, really. Even if teams didn't change players from the previous stage, a lot of teams have still changed roles, so between the two things, role changes and player changes, just every team looks different than they did in the past. Some players have been put on entry, other players have been taken off entry, things like this. So I have a sheet with a little bit of data here, but first let's just glance at SiegeGG and take a look at a few things, and let me explain a few things. But first I want to say, a couple people told me that I should like look at notes or script out what I'm gonna say or whatever. And yeah, like that's probably true. For some videos, I'll probably do that. I haven't done it for this video because this is just like one topic. It's not a bunch of things that I'm talking about in one video. But for other videos where I'm going to talk about a lot of topics, I'll try to do something like that. And yeah, it's a tendency of mine to just sort of ramble on and maybe circle back to things, but then also go off on tangents, and that's why I circle back to things. So I do appreciate the feedback. If you have any other sort of feedback, you can leave it, I guess, on Reddit, because I post most of the videos also on, or well, a link to the YouTube videos on Reddit, or you can just post them on YouTube, and then maybe everybody could see the videos, but I guess whichever one you prefer to do. And also I made that sheet gray there, so you know, it's a little bit easier on the eyes. There's no other colors in the sheet, so it's not too difficult to do. Right, so let's get into it. Oh yeah, and one more thing I want to say. A lot of what I'm going to do here is based on objectivity, or just based on the numbers and whatnot, and a lot of it is going to be based on subjectivity, because I have to sort of make judgment calls on some of these things, because just looking at entry players, like yes, you can look at everybody's entry stats, but it doesn't paint the entire picture, and just because somebody has more entry kills than somebody else doesn't necessarily mean somebody was the entry player and somebody else wasn't. But also the attacker and defender disparity is something you need to take note of, because on attack, I mean, usually the roles, as they call them, I mean, there's like hard support and like flex support, but the entry role, it's first and second entry. But on defense, there's not an entry role per se. Like nobody plays entry. Like you're trying to defend, you're not attacking. So a lot of times the entry players, whether they play entry on attack or not, are the roamers on defense, depending on the map and the site and the setup and whatnot. But then also the first line of defense, which is going to be recorded in the entry stats, can just be somebody playing a power position. Like if you are playing Pixel on top floor cafe, you could be the first player fighting and getting a kill or dying, even though like you're not entering or even close to entry. Like you're not even moving around the map, you're just holding a frontline power position. So keep this in mind. I tried to do things based on more of attack, but I don't have those stats easily accessible. I could go look back through my notes, but it's just a whole lot of stuff to look through to see who got their entry kills on attack and who got them on defense and whatnot, and entry deaths as well. So I'm gonna do this based off gut a little bit, but it is primarily based on who does have the most entry kills and deaths on each team. So we're gonna look at a primary entry and a secondary entry, and maybe they're reversible in some cases, but okay, so let's get down to it. I'll do it in order of the teams that are here, and then we'll go back to the sheet. So Dark Zero, Hyper generally in the past was their entry player, but now, as you can see, only 5 and 5. Eclipse and Pambazoo both have quite a few more entry kills than he does. So 15 for Pambazoo. I'm of course adding entry kills and deaths, so that's just the number of entry duels they've been involved in. And then Eclipse with 14. So I guess it's not Hyper anymore. Like he's sort of on a flex, and of course this is a smallish data set. Like it's Dark Zero especially, only 4 maps for them. Everyone else either 5 or 6 maps. So only 6 maps maximum for Mirage and Australis, I think. So right, but you know, Hyper 10 versus 14 and 15, it's a pretty big percentage, in 40%, 50% more entry duels. So I guess it's not Hyper anymore as much, which is interesting. And I think it's a similar trend last stage as well, where I think he actually had a lot more than he does this stage, but maybe not as many as that. I just looked at it, but I don't actually remember for certain. But anyway, we're basing it off this. So the entry players I'm going to go with for this are Pambazoo and Eclipse, with Pambazoo on primary, Eclipse on secondary. SSG spread out the kills quite a bit, as you can see. I mean, 10 entry kills on 2 of their not specifically entry players, and that's just sort of how SGG plays. Hot and Cold might be the best entry player in the league, but he does not appear to be the primary entry for Space Station because Fultz has been in 5 more entry duels. And of course, sometimes players are engaged in the first duel round, but they do not get a kill or a death, so it's not recorded as such. And so there is a little bit of a disparity there, but I just have the numbers to look at here, so that's what we're going to focus on. Fultz hasn't been doing too well. I mean, just a 1.0 rating. The rating has been hogged by Hot and Cold and Rampy, as you can see here. But I mean, as long as Space Station's winning, which they have 4 of their 5 games, I don't think it's really too big of a problem for anybody. And even their support's doing pretty well, right? Only -3, almost a 1.0 rating. Right, so it's Fultz and Hot and Cold. Moving on, Oxygen have had a little bit of a role switch, and it's a little bit ambiguous who is really the entry player here. I mean, obviously Vertical is one, but the second one, it's not Laxing or Fox, as you can see. Very few entry kills on either of them. But Yaga and Kino. Kino actually has more than Yaga, but Yaga's been way more successful. And Kino's been playing Ashe. And I suppose probably Yaga's getting more of his on defense too, because Kino's playing the smoke, which generally you don't want to be involved in the entry duels, and so it won't be a lot of the time. But I put Kino as the entry because, as I said before, I'm going to try to favor attackers for the entry role, and he's playing Ashe and he has more. So I'm just going to go with Kino instead of Vertical, which is a switch up. Kino was the hard support player before, and now on attack, Yaga is doing more of the breach. It is on Ace, admittedly, which is the, maybe the fraggiest of the hard breachers, or maybe Maverick, I guess, because, well, he literally has frags. But as you'll see, there's actually a couple of the primary or secondary entry players that have been playing Maverick. Right, so Kino and Vertical there. TSM, it's a little bit weird because Merc and Bolo have the same number. They are both tied in second. And in the past, and well, specifically last stage, I think it was Merc and Bolo that had the most, with maybe, no, I think it was Merc and then Bolo, and Achieve did not have as many as either, but Achieve looks to be more on the entry. Him and, curiously, Bolo and him are both, have both played Sledge more than any other operator, but of course you have to take into account when looking at the operator thing, it is just the operator they play the most of. If Achieved has played 99% Sledge for his, or well, say 50% Sledge, and like some combination of 20% this, operator 10, whatever, and Bolo's played like 10% Sledge, but no other operator has reached 10%, it's still going to say Sledge, of course. So with all that being said, I picked Merc and Achieve as the entry on this. Generally, Bolo is thought of as the flex player, but he does play, he does enter, he does entry quite a lot, just not all the time. And based on just the stats for this stage, Achieved has a lot, and then Merc is just, yeah. This one was a little bit harder to pick, but I think Achieved and Merc is the duo I'm going to be looking at. And additionally, as you can tell, like some of these teams, it is harder to just pick like 2 entry players, because some teams have slightly different structure where this might be like an entry trio kind of thing, or it depends on the site, or it depends on a lot of factors. But I'm just trying to establish a rigid structure so that we can compare things a little bit better. Sonics. It's weird that it's Yeti here with the most entries, and I think that's because on defense he just roams a lot and he gets into a lot of opening duels, and he's won a lot of them, I guess. But I put Grixer as the primary and Yeti as the secondary, because, I mean, I guess because of the attackers is a big reason, Yana, and then Yeti playing Maverick. And in the past, like, couple stages, Yeti was mostly, like, the secondary support after Super, like, he was a secondary hard breach, but I do think it is the defense that is sort of padding his entry. So, but I still put it on him because it should, in theory, be Rexen, right? But Rexen just, for some reason, doesn't get a lot of entry kills, and since the difference is so high, like, it's, Yeti has almost double the entry duels Rexen has with 16 versus 9. So I went with Yeti here, but I'm not sure that's entirely accurate, but that's what we're going to run with. East Coast, Young Alec and Sippin here. Sippin, I think, has the worst entry line of maybe everybody, with one of the highest, well, maybe not one of the highest number of entries, but because they're pretty well hogged by Young Alec, he has to have one of the highest, well, one of the higher entry numbers. I mean, with being a primary entry, I suppose it makes sense. So Young Alec can sip in here. And then Astralis, we have J90 and DP Fire. I think it was like Iconic in the past, right? But J90 is just getting way more entries than Iconic, 8 more in this case. And DP Fire more even than J90. So it's clearly DP Fire on the primary. And Then for Mirage, we have Nyx, and I'm surprised it was Thomas. I didn't look at the stats before. I thought it would be Benji, and even loading for some reason has more than Benji. So, I don't know, weird there. But, I don't know, playing Yana, I guess you do the entries. Yeah, pretty bad entry scoreline, but a lot of entry duels, so putting him there. And then finally, we have NVK and creators for XS. So let's go back to the sheet and look at some things. So again, I have the teams, and these are ordered by their current standings as of play day 6 in the NAL. And some of it's a little arbitrary, like these 3 teams are tied on points, and these 3 teams are tied on points. So it's not the biggest difference in a lot of cases, but just so we could see if there's any sort of trends from the top to the bottom. And there's not too much, as you can see. So what else do I have on here, right? I put the first entries over here, second entries over here, there are corresponding stats after that. And then at the end, EPIED, entry players involved in, oh wait, yeah, I guess maybe I should have an extra I, but you can take out the in. Entry players involved in entry duels, right? So this is the percentage. So I just added up, you know, it's like 16 plus 14, and then that number, so 30 in this case, divided by the total number of entry duels throughout the team. So you can't see it, but of course it was like 52 for Sonics, and it's mostly the number of rounds they played, but sometimes there's weird stuff, like if there's a team kill for the opening kill, like there's no technical entry duel for the round, so it skews it a little bit, so I went based off entry kills and entry deaths. And as you can see, not too much of a correlation, except for some reason, and I thought this would be the opposite. For some reason, the higher concentration of entry kills going to your entry players and entry deaths, entry duels going to your entry players is at the bottom, and I would have thought it would have been the other way. Like, the 2 like big outliers, the really high numbers here, are Astralis and Beast Coast, and they're 2 of the lower tier teams. And then also a pretty big number is Mirage. And then everyone up here in the top 5 there's one barely above 60, but besides that they're all sub 60. And then there's one other, and the lowest one I guess is XSET here, which is curious. But so not too much of a trend there. Well, no, I guess there is kind of a trend there, except for this is just an outlier in that way. But yeah, so I thought that was weird. I would have thought that the more your entry players are doing, whether they fail or succeed, doing what they're supposed to be doing, would have meant higher success generally, but I guess not. So then, yeah, otherwise survival percentage, entry kills and entry deaths, and then so it's just the kills minus the death for differential. And then the operators, and then down here I just have the number of each operator that was picked. So there are 7 different operators played among the primary or secondary entry players. Finka has been played a lot by Merc, and Buck is creators. And this one probably doesn't count as much because they've played more Coastline than anything. I think 3 of their 5 games have been, except that is 3 of their 5 games has been on Coastline. So Buck main doesn't really fly too much on the other maps, but you can get away with it on Coastline. So I'm not sure what creators' main operator. I guess I can just go look what I could maybe assess based on like what's missing. It's probably Zofia, right? I guess maybe he plays Ashe. I don't actually creators. I'm assuming it's Zofia. Not 100% on that, right? They have a Sledge. They have a Yana. Yeah, okay. Probably Zofia. Not 100% sure on that. Right, and it's a little bit curious that we have 2 Mavericks here. Maverick, you can certainly frag out with Maverick, and you are never taking him as your primary hard breach. It's in very, very rare instances, sometimes he's taken as the only hard breach, which automatically makes him the primary hard breacher on your team. But here, or well, rather in most cases, that's not what happens. You take it to complement your Hibana or your Thermite, maybe your Ace or whatever. But I think every once in a while, like Cafe, maybe he's the only one taken. But yeah, so he has frags. He is a 3-speed. He has a, high-ish rate of fire kind of gun. So he is frag oriented in his kit, except for that you need him to stay alive or to use his gadget. But a lot of times, in a lot of rounds, he will be doing it first. If you're attacking Oregon top floor, you just send him to open attic, and once that's open, he can pretty well die. That's the only thing you needed his gadget for, because if you were doing like a closet take, you're sending your Thermite, Hibana, whoever over there. Yeah, you never like rotate the Maverick. You never need him to open that wall, and it'd be very dangerous opening that wall also. But if they have anything denying, you can just get it from below. Anyways, it's a lot of situations like that. If you're at clubhouse wall, whether that be CC wall or jacuzzi wall, either one, you just open it up, and then Maverick has done his job. Maybe Maverick goes to garage as well. But again, yeah, he just uses his primary gadget, and then maybe he needs to use his frags for something in particular, some gadget in particular, but then he can just go and fight, right? So it sort of makes sense, and he is the only hard breacher on this. If I had put Yaga instead of Kino, Ace would be on here, but that's not the case here. And it is, I think it's a little bit weird with that Sledge is number 1, right? I don't know, do you guys not think this is weird? So Ashe and Zofia in the past were the queens, I guess, of entry. For the longest time it was Ashe, and then Zofia was introduced in the game, and then it was, back and forth maybe. Ashe fairly recently had 3 primary breach charges for her gadget, and then I guess also the secondary breach charge. But at one point, did Ashe, I don't know, did she have 3 primary breach charges and also flashes at the same time, or was that never at the same time? I'm not sure, but and then Zofia recently has fallen off of entry because her gun got nerfed, her primary gun, but then now a lot of people use the LMG, and a lot of people say it's just like better, and that maybe people should have been using it all along. But the other gun, the AK, was very good is the thing, right? It had not very much recoil, it had a decent rate of fire, did a lot of damage per bullet, and had an angled grip, which not everybody used, but it's a great boon. You can use it if you like. So right, they've fallen a little bit, and mostly been replaced by Yana in terms of super similar role, where just Yana has a certain number of explosives and not that much utility out of it, because okay, what do I mean by that? Like Zofia has 2 breaches, 2 grenade launcher rounds. I don't know. They both have secondary breach charges, Ashe and Zofia, so it gets confusing calling them breach charges, right? What I'm trying to say is they have similar number of explosives, 2 or 3 historically. Ashe had 3 at one point. Yana has 3 right now between the Gon 6 and the frag. But Sledge is a little bit different because his gadget is so useful out, and it is not tied to the explosive. Yana's gadget is also not the thing tied to the explosive on the character, but the gadget's not quite as useful because, I mean, it gathers intel. It's really good, but it's not. It's no like sledgehammer, right? So yeah, maybe just an arbitrary thing. But right, why is Sledge number 1? He has it's a fine gun, like it's easy to use gun, but it's not a high rate of fire gun. Both Yana's guns shoot faster. Ashe's guns shoot faster. Zofia's gun shoots faster. Sledge's gun shoots slowly, and it doesn't kick very much. He used to have the SMG 11, which he doesn't have anymore. He hasn't had at this stage. And he has the frags, and he has the sledgehammer. And so, if you're worried about losing your frags, I guess you would similarly be worried about that on Yana, on Mav, on any of these characters really. All of them have explosives except for Buck, right? But if Sledge dies, you lose a sledgehammer and 2 frag grenades. If Ashe dies, you lose 2 primary breach rounds. Of course, the secondary breaches are explosives, but they're just not as useful. You can't shoot them from range and like destroy. Like you can't really use them to destroy Banshees, Evil Eyes, deployable shields, Goyo shields, any of that stuff. So they're not that valuable, right? So yeah. So what I'm trying to say is, I find it like kind of weird that so many Sledges are on entry, and I guess they're doing pretty well because, like, I guess not so much this page, but Hot and Cold had been playing decent bit of Sledge, like Vertical's playing Sledge, Achieved, Eclipse, J90, some of the more successful players this stage are on the Sledge. But it seems like you're risking so much, right? And I guess it's an equal number. Yeah, there's 3 over here and 3 over here. If Sledge is your secondary entry, you're putting him less at risk, right? If it's the primary, which it is the case of Nyx, NVK, Vertical, some of the higher numbers here, especially in the case of, 14, 17, 19. I mean, Nyx has more than anybody else, which is interesting. And then DP Fire's next, I think, right? Okay, yeah, and here I go again, going off on a bit of a tangent. I'm just all of this to say that I think it's a little bit curious that like these are the 2 that are higher when they have more to lose. Like Sledge seems like the most to lose. If Sledge has already used his frags and opened enough ceiling, then I guess it doesn't matter anymore. But by the time that you are able to open ceiling, you have probably already been involved in your entry duels. Yana, compared to Zofia and Ashe, have more distance throwables. Yana has, of course, the Gon 6 and frags, and Ashe has 2 primary breaching rounds. Zofia has 2 primary breaching rounds. And I guess in a lot of rounds, maybe you're not taking either of these in some cases. Like you're taking a Sledge, you're taking a Yana, you're taking like Hibana, and then Thatcher, I guess, if he's available, but you'll take Maverick, and then you'll take something else. I mean, probably you are still taking Zofia, but I just think it's a little bit weird. Maybe the reason Zofia's lower because now the only really good gun she has is an LMG, which not only doesn't have an angle grip, but by default aims slower even than an assault rifle. So there's that. Yeah, okay, that's probably enough talking about that. Let's look at some of the players here. So, right, as you can see, hot and cold, I mean, flawless entry, 12-0. I think the last stage he went plus 12 at 20-8, but this stage he's already plus 12 at 12-0. And of course, it could go down, but it could also go up. As I said before, the highest numbers it would appear here are the 13-12 and the 12-12. The only IGLs, I think, that are here, primary IGLs, and that's a little bit of a touchy subject in a way, but are Achieved, who I guess I put on secondary entry. And is that the only case that I put? Okay, really quick, and Nyx, but I put Achieved lower than Merc, or well, I put him on Achieved on secondary entry rather than first entry, even though Merc has fewer entry kills, because it just seems like the roles. And the only other case I did that in right is the Grixer and Yeti, I think. Fultz has more, Vertical has more, Panda more. Yeah, okay. So just 2 exceptions there. So nothing too crazy. Going down the numbers, it's not that consistent. I mean, like, I guess in terms of just looking at the primary entries, the highest entry differential is at the top, and the lowest one's not at the bottom though. I mean, the very next one is the second lowest, and Merc's pretty low. So not really too much of a trend here. And then, I mean, this one is the highest number here, and it's pretty high up. And some of the 2 lower numbers are kind of on the lower end, but there's not too much of a trend here, which is a little bit curious. I don't have access, well, technically I have access to it, but I don't have easy access to the conversion rates, like rounds where a team gets the opening kill and that they win it. I know more often, if you get the opening kill more often than not, you win the round. I mean, and of course, like, it makes sense. You're in a 5v4 at that point. But some teams have 80%, some teams have 60%, you know, varying numbers. I would be curious to see that statistic, but I don't think there's anywhere online I can find easy access to that, and I didn't want to have to convert all of the numbers through all the playdays. That would have been quite a task. Yeah, survival rates, they seem to go down. They seem to trend downwards for the most part. It's more tightly than entry differential. Seems to go down. 42 is the highest, tied for the highest among all of them. Yeah, hot and cold and Grixer. And then Nyx with 14%, which is so low, which is crazy. Oh, that's like 1 in 7. And then DP Fire is pretty low as well. So it makes sense to trend downwards. If your players are surviving, you're winning more rounds. If you won more rounds, it is more likely that more of your players have survived, just how it goes in Siege. The primary win condition is intended to be the diffuser, I suppose, but just, you know, a lot of times it doesn't come to that. It just comes down to who kills whom. Yeah, so I guess that covers most of these categories, and you can see what's going on here for the most part. Like, I guess I sort of talked about the operators, the entry numbers, the survival numbers, the trend here. So I guess that's really most of what I want to talk about. Maybe I'll revisit this at the end of the stage, and maybe the players here will have changed slightly. There are, you know, Dark Zero has like 4 more games to play. Some other teams have 3 games, 2 games. A lot of games to be played, but I guess not that many relative to how many have already been played. So things could change up. And it's a fun topic because, I mean, people like seeing kill numbers and whatnot, and it makes players look good or make players look bad. But, and I guess, you know, this is a little bit, it's a little bit to examine the numbers, but maybe, I imagine most of the people that watch my videos already know a ton about Pro League. But if anybody that doesn't know a ton about Pro League watch these videos, then maybe they can learn a little bit about, I guess I didn't specifically talk too much about what an entry is, but you can see a little bit of what's going on. You can see the team structure, like who are the entry players, and I mean, entry players are just the people going in and taking the opening duels and whatnot. I was planning on talking about like the history of the entry duos, and I think there's just not that much history in a lot of them, right? Grixer and Yeti of the duos on here might be the longest standing one. I guess technically they weren't both entry forever. Like Grixer might have always been, I'm not sure his role entirely. Yeti certainly has not always been, especially recently, hasn't always been on entry. And even maybe now he's not technically on entry, but he does have the most entry duels on his team, so I put him there, as I said before. But yeah, no, they've been playing with each other for quite a while. They're on Sonics now, but before that they were on E United together, and then maybe another roster before that, like, or a different org rather. Fultz and Hot and Cold, of course, Hot and Cold got picked up pretty recently by Space Station. Kino and Vertical have been playing together for like a year, but Kino just recently has come off of hard support and now has been playing some of the Ashe, some of the entry. Merkin achieved, I don't know how far back that goes, to like season 10 or something. So maybe they're the longest. They're probably longer standing together than Yeti and Grixer. Pamba and Eclipse, of course. Eclipse is fairly new. Young Alec is very new to tier 1, and Sippin hasn't been in tier 1 that long. Nix and Thomas. Thomas just got picked up on the team. NVK just picked up on the team. Creators has been there for, this full season. And then DP Fire also new on the team. So yeah, a lot of the newer players, and that's the way people think of it a lot. You put your young guns, you pick up hot gunners, and you put them on entry and fragging rolls and whatnot. But yeah, I'm surprised it's this much so. And I guess like a lot of the players here have been playing for a long time, but it's just in terms of the duo. Like Hot and Cold, player for a long time, but was a support player for a long time. Vertical, really old player. Generally been a fragger the whole time. I guess even Merc and Achieve are getting like to be veterans, even though they're more from like the middle of the game, but that's still quite a while ago. They've been in tier 1 since, again, like season 10 or something, Pro League season 11 maybe, 9, I don't know, around there. Eclipse, of course, very long-standing player, the longest-standing player. But then a lot of these players are newer. Maybe Thomas has been around for a decent amount of time, but not in tier 1. And yeah, these are generally just the younger teams, the newer player teams. Yeah, so I guess, there's me off and rambling again. But those were things that I did want to mention, and I didn't get around to doing it earlier in the video. So, right, if, as I said before, you have any feedback for me, if you think that I need to script every video, if you think my videos are just way too scatterbrained, because this is a long video, but I think I stayed fairly well on topic. But yeah, no, if you just have any general feedback or whatever, I appreciate hearing it. Some of the things I might already be aware of, but some of the things I might not be aware of. And if you could be so generous as to like the video, subscribe. If you watch the video, I imagine most of the people that watch these, based on the number of views, are subscribed, because on maybe the more popular ones, I'll get like 100 views over the course of the first day or two. And I'm at like 68 subscribers, and it is cool seeing the number of subscribers grow. I do appreciate it. If anybody else is hearing this and you haven't subscribed and you've listened 28 minutes into this video, you probably are digging this content or whatever, or you forgot to turn this off or something. Hit me with the sub, because everyone, especially being with as few subs as I have, everyone puts a smile on my face, to be certain. So yeah, call to action, all good to go. Probably tomorrow I'm gonna do predictions for Playday number 7, and I have a couple other things sort of like this in the works. And yeah, with all that being said, I will catch you in the next video.